Welcome. Lean back, relax your shoulders, and let the noise of the day slowly fade from your mind. Feel your eyelids growing heavy, the rhythm of your breathing slowing down. Right now, as these words reach you, I wonder exactly where in the world you are. From which country, from which city are you joining this journey? Please write the city and country you are currently in down in the comments section below. Seeing others who are preparing for sleep in different corners of the world, in different cities at the same moment as you, reminds us that we are not alone in this quiet caravan. Leave a small hello. And if this calm historical narrative is good for your soul, if it rests your mind, you can support the continuation of this journey by liking the video and subscribing to our channel. Your presence is our most valuable compass. Today we will embark on a long and dusty journey through the sands of time. We will go far away from the speed of the modern world, from the urgency of notifications and screens, to an era where the world was still full of blank spaces on the maps. The Silk Road. When we hear this name, romantic images usually come to mind. Bright fabrics waving in the wind, spice-scented markets, exotic palaces. However, history, when we look beyond the legends, usually whispers a quieter, harder, and much more monotonous truth. This road was not actually a single road. It was a network of dangerous and endless trails, connecting continents, passing over mountains and deserts. Over the next 2 hours, we will explore the shadowed parts of this ancient route. We will look at the calloused hands of a nameless worker walking in the freezing winds of the Gobi Desert. We will witness the oddities seen by Marco Polo setting out from Venice. We will keep the silent watch of thousands of soldiers hidden underground and feel the solemn peace inside a Mongol Khan's tent. This is not a story of heroes or battles. This is the story of endurance, of waiting, and of the hypnotic infinity of the horizon. Now, imagine the ground beneath your feet changing, giving way to soft, shifting sand. The sound of the wind changes. We are going to the gates of the east, into the middle of nowhere. Imagine yourself in the 13th century AD, in the heart of Central Asia, on the edge of the vast Gobi Desert. Set aside your identity. You are not an emperor. You are not a general, a noble wearing silk, or a wealthy merchant. You are the nameless motor of the Silk Road, barely mentioned even in the footnotes of history. You are a caravan hand, a camel tender. For you, the day does not begin with the sun. When the sun rises, your working hours are already over. It is time to hide. The only way to cross the desert is to escape the brutal gaze of that scorching star. Therefore, your life belongs to the night and the twilight. Your awakening happens at the darkest time of the sky, hours before dawn breaks, in that gray, uncertain hour. The first thing you feel is a sharp cold. The desert vomits all the heat it trapped during the day back into space at night, leaving behind a dry, knife-like frost that penetrates your bones. You are wearing layers of rough clothing made of felt and wool. These clothes are heavy, itchy, and stiff with the dirt of years. But you cannot take them off. They are your armor. Your joints crack as you straighten up on the hard mattress where you lay. The air smells of dust. It always smells of dust. This fine, powder-like sand has worked its way into every seam of your clothes, into the roots of your hair, into your ears. When you touch your tongue to the roof of your mouth, you taste that metallic, gritty flavor. Even if you drink water, it doesn't go away. Even if you eat, it remains. The taste of the desert is now your taste. Your work begins with that arduous loading ritual repeated every night. And at the center of this ritual are they, the Bactrian camels. These animals are not the docile and noble creatures described in fairy tales. They are massive, stubborn, and extremely smelly. As you approach these two humped giants, that sharp mixture of ammonia and musk hits your nose. The smell of unwashed wet wool, rotting grass being chewed as cud and sweat. As a camel tender, this scent is like your second skin. It has permeated your flesh. With hands numb from the cold, tying the loads with stiff hemp ropes is physical torture. The ropes cut your fingers. Even the calluses on your palms do not dull this pain. Bales of silk, compressed blocks of tea, chests full of porcelain. Each is heavy, and each must be placed with millimetric balance. If the balance is off, the camel will not walk. Or worse, it will throw the load in the middle of the desert, in the center of nothingness. As you tighten the knots, they growl, moan, show their large teeth, and if they get the chance, they spit that famous sticky saliva at you. When the caravan is finally in order and sets off, the real test begins for you. Walking. Most people think everyone in caravans rides on camels swaying along. This is a great misconception. Camels carry goods. People walk. Valuable goods are more important than your comfort. For hours, days, weeks, on your feet are boots made of raw hide with worn soles. You feel the ground with every step. The desert floor is not always soft sand. Sometimes it is sharp gravel, sometimes hardened clay plates. The rhythm of your steps swings in your mind like a pendulum. Left, right, left, right. The sand pulls your foot back slightly with every step, as if it wants to swallow you, to fix you where you are. This ground creates a constant, throbbing, dull, burning sensation in your leg muscles, in your calves. The landscape around you almost never changes. Under the moonlight, the Gobi is like a frozen ocean undulating in shades of gray and silver. The hills are identical to each other. You walk for an hour, lift your head, and the view is the same. You do not feel like you are moving. You only know that time is passing. This visual monotony numbs your mind. You enter a kind of trance. Your thoughts slow down, your dreams fade. Only the command to take the next step remains in your brain. Silence. The silence of the desert is heavy. It is not like the noise of cities. This is an absolute void. There is only the swish-swish sound of the camel's soft pads rubbing against the sand, the creaking of leather straps stretching, and the deep, wheezing breath sounds the animals occasionally make. Sometimes even your own breathing sounds loud to you. When you look up, you see the sky, a sky you would never see in cities. The Milky Way flows above your head like a massive, bright river. The stars are so bright, so close, you feel as if you could touch them if you reached out. But this beauty is also frightening. It reminds you how small, how insignificant you are under that infinity. But this trance state is dangerous because the desert is always alert. Your greatest fear is that dark wall appearing on the horizon, the sandstorm they call the Caravan, black storm. When the sound of the wind changes, when that thin whistle turns into a deep, threatening roar, you must act without panic but with haste. You make the camels kneel. You use their warm, smelly bodies as a trench, a wall. You pull your heavy felt blankets over your head, curl up in a fetal position, and wait. When the storm hits, the world disappears. Light goes away. Sand grains prick your skin like thousands of needles, passing through even the thickest fabric. Your ears ring. Breathing, pulling the hot and dusty air into your lungs is like suffocating. In those moments, time stops. You cannot know how long it will last. An hour? A day? You just wait. Against this enormous force of nature, you feel that you are just a grain of dust left to the mercy of the wind. When the storm subsides, the caravan shakes itself off and continues on its way. However, the next stop is not always salvation. Oases. Although they look like green saviors on the map, in reality, they are not always paradise. Water, the most precious and dangerous thing here. Oasis water is usually stagnant. Its edges are muddy, covered with flies and algae. When you bend down, fill your leather flask and drink, you realize the water is warm, salty, and tastes slightly of rotting plants and animal waste. But you have to drink. This water can lead to cramps that wring your intestines, exhaustion lasting for days, diseases that will leave you collapsed where you are. There is no luxury of sick leave on the caravan road. You either walk with that aching stomach, those trembling legs, or you stay behind. And staying behind means your bones mixing with the sand. And then there are the unseen dangers, bandits. You rarely see them, but you always feel their ominous presence on the back of your neck, especially in narrow rock passes, in shadows where moonlight does not reach. The caravan master places armed guards at the front and back, but you walk in that tense silence, with only the thin stick you use to guide your camel in your hand. Every rock piece looks like a human silhouette, an archer lying in ambush. Every sound of the wind resembles the sound of a sword being drawn from its scabbard. This fear is not the sudden fear that makes your heart race. This is a cold, sticky, and constant unease that sits in your stomach. The question, is it tonight, gnaws at your mind. As dawn begins to break, as the sky turns purple, then pale pink, and finally blinding white, your body trembles with fatigue. The caravan stops. It is time to unload. The camels moan again, complain again. Tents are pitched. A fire is lit, but this fire is not for warming, but for preparing provisions. Your food is simple, usually dried yogurt balls hard as stone called kurut, or dry bread that looks designed to break teeth. You try to soften these by dipping them into tea boiling in a copper cauldron. There is no taste, only the obligation to fill the stomach. A piece of tough, salty dried meat is perhaps a luxury once a week. After eating your meal quietly, you try to sleep sweating under the buzzing of flies during the hottest hours of the day. The inside of the tent is like a bathhouse. The air is heavy, but you have to sleep. Because when the sun sets, when that cold wind blows again, you will get up again, tie those heavy loads, and start that endless, rhythmic, hypnotic walk again. Left, right, left, right. The splendor of the Silk Road is carried on the backs of thousands of nameless people like you in this gray, dusty, and silent cycle. Now let us shift our mental focus away from those nameless caravan workers and turn to one of the figures history knows best, but perhaps understands least, Marco Polo. But do not visualize an explorer in your mind, or a hero with a sword in hand. Instead, imagine a young man far from home, in a world where every rule he knows has been overturned, simply observing, taking notes, enduring, and changing. The year is 1271. Marco is just 17 years old, a Venetian whose beard has not even fully grown. When leaving Venice, Marco's world consisted of water, the lapping of canals, the smell of moss-covered stones, the humid air, and the salt of the Mediterranean. This was the universe he knew. However, this journey he embarked on with his father Niccolo and his uncle Maffeo would tear him away from this world completely. The road ahead was not a ticket for weeks or months, but a one-way ticket for a journey that would last 3.5 years. 3.5 years. Try to weigh this time spent just to go from one point to another in your mind. Seasons change, the lines on your face change, the words on your tongue change, and you are still on the road. This was not travel. It was life itself. As the journey progressed, the world Marco knew began to fade, replaced by shades of gray and brown. When their caravan climbed into the Pamir Mountains on the borders of present-day Afghanistan and Tajikistan, they faced a reality no European had experienced until that day. In his notes, Marco named this place the roof of the world. They had climbed so high that even birds did not fly. The silence here was different from the silence of the desert. This was a silence where the air thinned, where even sound was lost in the void. Marco noticed that at that altitude even fire burned differently. With the attention of a scientific observer, he wrote that the flames were weak and pale, and that it took hours to boil water or cook meat. Due to the lack of oxygen, the fire lacked power. Camp life slowed down. Every movement, every breath became heavier. The cold froze not just the skin but thoughts as well. The most fascinating yet disappointing part of this journey for Marco was the collision of legends with reality. In his childhood in the streets of Venice, Marco had grown up with stories of unicorns, those elegant, white, and magical creatures. He was sure he would see them when he went to the east, and one day around Sumatra, he thought he saw them. But what he encountered was not that elegant horse with a silky mane from his dreams. What he saw was a rhinoceros. In the notes he jotted down in his journal, he describes this disappointment with that calm, objective language, with the coolness of an accountant. They are as big as elephants, but their legs are shorter. Like pigs, they love mud and constantly roll in it. They have a black, rough horn in the middle of their heads, and they do not lie in the laps of virgins as in the stories. They are ugly, brute creatures to look at. This moment was the moment Marco's childhood ended. The legend had been replaced by a muddy, gray, and heavy reality. History sometimes breaks the spell and leaves behind only what is. And finally, that epic arrival. After years of marching, Kublai Khan's summer palace, Xanadu, Shangdu. When Marco arrived here, he was no longer that timid Venetian boy. He was 21. The dust of years, the timbre of different languages and fatigue had settled on him. But the scene he saw was orderly, symmetrical, and magnificent enough to make him forget all that fatigue. The Khan's palace, unlike the narrow-streeted, chaotic, foul-smelling European cities, was built with mathematical precision. Marco wrote that the marble walls of the palace stretched for miles, and that the gardens, artificial lakes, swans, and thousands of servants inside functioned like a silent machine. Here life was the exact opposite of the struggle for survival in the desert, but it was bound by equally strict rules. The things that caught Marco's attention the most were silence and protocol. No one could speak loudly in the emperor's presence. Steps were inaudible thanks to soft slippers. In the hall where Kublai Khan ate, the servants who presented him with food wore masks made of fine silk over their mouths and noses. Why? Because their breath should not touch the son of heaven's food, should not pollute the air he breathed. This detail deeply affected Marco. An order where only the rustling of silk was heard, in a hall with thousands of people. Meals were served by hundreds of waiters on pure gold plates. Kumis, that is, fermented mare's milk, was offered in silver goblets. Marco had to get used to the taste of this sour and slightly alcoholic drink. However, what surprised Marco most as a merchant's son was not the wealth, but the system. The paper money used in the Khan's empire. While people in Europe traded with gold and silver coins, papers made from mulberry tree bark bearing the Khan's seal were valid here. Marco could not believe it. How can it be, he thought, that a piece of tree bark can be as valuable as gold? This was the foundation of the modern economy, and Marco called it the Khan's alchemy. It took time for him to understand that value lay not in the material, but in trust. And then there was the yam system, that enormous postal network connecting the Khan's vast empire. Marco watched with admiration the stations established every 25 miles along the roads. As a mounted courier approached the station with bells on his waist, the sound of the bells would be heard from miles away. The other courier at the station would immediately get ready, mounting a fresh horse. As soon as the tired courier got off the horse, he would throw the message and the load to the other, and the new courier would continue on the road without stopping, without his feet touching the ground. Night, day, rain, or snow, Marco watched this speed. While it took months for a letter to go in Europe, here it took days. This was the internet of that era. Information flowed on the hooves of horses. Marco Polo spent exactly 17 years in this palace, in the service of Kublai Khan. 17 years. A lifetime. Long enough to forget his own language, to struggle to remember the face of Venice. The Khan liked him. He liked his intelligent observations, his honesty, and his attention to detail. He sent Marco to the furthest corners of the empire, to collect taxes, to report rebellions. Marco saw the depths of China, Burma, and India, and finally, when the time came to return home, the year was 1295. When they returned to Venice, to that familiar but now foreign city, no one recognized them. When they knocked on the door, their relatives looked at them as if they were ghosts. These three men standing before them did not look like Venetians. Their faces were scorched by sun and wind, their skin hardened. They wore rough Mongol kaftans heavy with the dirt of years. When they spoke the Venetian dialect with a strange, broken accent, squeezing Tatar words in between. They did not believe them. "You are dead," they said. According to legend, Marco and his family gave a banquet to prove their identities. And in the middle of the banquet they brought those old, tattered kaftans. With knives they ripped the seams of the kaftans, and from between the seams hundreds of rubies, emeralds, diamonds, and sapphires spilled onto the table. The family had hidden their fortune by sewing it into the lining of their clothes. However, even though they proved their wealth, no one fully believed the stories Marco told. They laughed when he said millions of people. They mocked him when he said they burned black stones to keep warm, referring to coal. They nicknamed him Il Milione, that is the man who exaggerates everything, who multiplies everything by 1,000,000. Marco was not lying. He had just seen a reality so vast, complex, and different that the people of that era could not even imagine it, down to all its boring logistical details. During his days in prison, while dictating his memories to his cellmate Rustichello, he was actually creating an inventory of how big the world was, not an adventure novel. On his deathbed, when his friends told him, "Confess your lies to save your soul. Say that you made up those monsters, those palaces," Marco's last words were these: "I have not told half of what I saw." Now imagine that moment when Marco, in his stone house in Venice, looks out the window at the grey sky. Physically, he was home, but his mind was still on the steppe, in the sound of those bell-ringing couriers, in the silence of the silk-masked servants, and in the roar. Our caravan now reaches the eastern end of the journey, the countryside of the city of Xi'an in present-day Shanxi province, China. We leave behind the wind of the desert, the groans of camels, and the silks of the palace. Now we descend underground into absolute silence, dampness, and darkness. We will look at an obsession with eternity that has remained hidden for centuries beneath the vibrant trade of the Silk Road. We rewind time a bit further back to the 3rd century BC. And then suddenly we jump to modern times, to a dry spring morning in 1974. Imagine a farmer named Yang Jifa. The sun is high, the air is dusty. The fields are cracked from thirst. Yang and his brothers are desperately trying to dig a water well to save their crops. This is a quiet piece of land at the foot of Mount Lishan, full of persimmon trees. Think of the rhythmic beat of the pickaxe hitting the soil. Thud, thud, thud. The earth is hard, reddish, and stubborn. 1 meter, 2 meters. They go down 3 meters. There is no water, only dry earth. And then the tip of the pickaxe hits something different. Not stone, a hollow sound. Not metallic, but dull. Yang thinks he has found an old vase or a bowl. Maybe I'll keep tobacco in it, he thinks to himself. He bends down, gently clearing the soil with his hands. But what he feels at his fingertips is not smooth ceramic. It is hardened, fired clay. He scrapes the soil away a little more. And at that moment, he meets a pair of eyes staring back at him from the darkness. Not alive, but not dead either. The face of a life-sized man made of clay. His eyes are almond-shaped, his gaze dull and serious. His hair is gathered in an intricate bun. Yang Jifa did not know it at that moment, but his pickaxe had broken the door to one of the world's greatest archaeological mysteries, the Terracotta Army, the clay soldiers. This was not a tomb. It was a breathless city built underground. Now imagine walking inside those pits on the wooden scaffold set up by archaeologists. Feel the air change. The dry heat outside gives way to cool, damp, musty air. Down below there are exactly 8,000 soldiers arranged in orderly ranks. 8,000. It is hard to visualize this number. Enough silent people to fill a stadium. But the most hypnotic feature of this army is not its number, but its details. These soldiers are not products coming out of a factory, poured into molds, copies of each other. If we slowly move our camera closer to their faces, we face a chilling truth. Each one's face is different. One soldier seems to be smiling slightly, while the one next to him is frowning. One has a thin, curled mustache. The other's is bushy and drooping. One looks old, with sunken cheeks and tired. The other is young, full-faced and excited. Their ear structures, nose bridges, forehead widths, they are all different. How is this possible? Archaeologists discovered that this was a massive assembly line production. Bodies, legs, and arms were made with standard molds. The legs were made of solid clay to carry that massive weight, each weighing about 440 pounds. And the bodies were hollow to be light. But the heads were shaped individually by master sculptors, by hand. Perhaps there were real soldiers modeling for them. And those faces were the portraits of real people who lived, breathed, loved, and died 2,200 years ago. Souls trapped in clay, as if a Medusa looked at them and turned them all to stone where they stood. The details do not end with the faces. When you bend down and look at their feet, you see the tread patterns on the soles of their shoes, the non-slip teeth. The rivets on their armor are crafted one by one. Even the lines on their palms are distinct. And these hands were not empty. When the soldiers were first buried, they held real bronze swords, spears, and crossbows, ready for use in battle. Over time, the wooden handles rotted, and the metal parts fell to the ground. However, when archaeologists found these swords, they were shocked. Despite remaining under damp soil for 2,000 years, the swords were gleaming, rust-free, and they were so sharp that they could still cut through a stack of paper in a single stroke. Analysis showed that the Chinese used a technology similar to chrome plating, which modern science only patented in 1937 to protect weapons against rust at that time. History was more advanced than we knew. However, a great tragedy is also hidden within this discovery: the death of colors. The gray, earth-colored soldiers we see in museums today are actually ghosts. The originals were not like this. The emperor's army was colorful. Armor was black and maroon. Tunics were bright green, blue, and pink. Faces were flesh-colored. These paints were applied over a special organic layer called Chinese lacquer, obtained from tree sap. This lacquer remained intact for centuries in the damp soil. However, the moment archaeologists removed the soil and brought the statues to daylight, a chemical nightmare began. The moment the damp lacquer came into contact with dry air and oxygen, it began to dry rapidly. This time was only 15 seconds. Yes, 15 seconds. Archaeologists helplessly watched as those vibrant colors, thousands of years old, shriveled, cracked, flaked off, and turned to dust before their eyes. The color of the past could not withstand the breath of the present. Those faint cracking sounds heard in that silent pit were the sound of history being erased. Only the pale gray clay we know today remained. But the real mystery lies not in what the soldiers are guarding, but in what they are guarding against. This army of 8,000 is just an outer gate, a sentry. The actual tomb lies about a mile west of this site, under that massive pyramid that looks like a natural hill covered with trees. The tomb of China's first emperor, Qin Shi Huang, and this tomb has never been opened. Despite being equipped with modern technology, scanners, and robots, archaeologists do not dare to open that door. Why? Out of respect? No. Out of fear and the deadly trap inside. In texts written a century after the emperor's death, the ancient historian Sima Qian describes the inside of the tomb in fantastic language. The emperor had a replica of the universe built underground. Stars, planets, and constellations made of pearls shone on the ceiling of the burial chamber. On the floor, the geography of the empire was etched, and on this map, rivers and seas made not of water, but of mercury flowed. These mercury rivers circulated constantly with a mechanical system flowing forever. For years, historians thought this was a fairy tale. Rivers of mercury. Impossible. However, when recent scientific scans examined the soil, everyone shuddered. In samples taken from the soil and trees on the tomb mound, exactly 100 times the normal level of mercury was detected. The legend was true. Down below in that pitch darkness, rivers made of a silver heavy and toxic liquid may still be flowing around that silent map with a mechanical rustle for 2,200 years. This mercury is not just a decoration, but also a deadly mechanism protecting the tomb. Mercury vapor fills the inside of the tomb, protecting the corpse and precious silks from bacteria, and turning the place into an unbreathable, toxic gas chamber for any grave robber or archaeologist who tries to open it. Also, Sima Qian mentions automatic crossbows placed at the tomb entrances, mechanisms triggered when the door opens, raining arrows on uninvited guests. Are the strings of these bows still taut after thousands of years? Do the metal mechanisms still work? No one wants to test it. Now think of that deep, unreachable silence, tens of meters underground, in a room where no light, no sound enters. Behind a door guarded by 8,000 clay soldiers, an emperor sleeping in a coffin perhaps made of gold and jade on the banks of a poisonous river of silver color. Outside, dynasties fell. The Mongols rode their horses, wars broke out, peace treaties were signed, cities were built, skyscrapers rose, but down below under that thick earth time stopped. Emperor Qin had searched for the elixir of immortality all his life. Ironically, he died of poisoning by drinking mercury pills prepared by his doctors, who told him they would give him immortality. The metal that killed him now protects his eternal sleep. In the dull, expressionless stares of the terracotta soldiers, there is the trace of that desperate but enormous struggle of man. Let us now emerge from that heavy, toxic, and trapped air of the underground. Let us draw that vast, clean, mint-scented steppe air deep into our lungs again. We are at the final stop of our journey. We are not at the gates of stone walls, castles, or underground cities. We are at the door of a palace that moves with the wind, the tent of a Mongol Khan. While Western kings imprisoned themselves behind thick stone walls for these masters of the Silk Road, home was not a fixed place. Home was a concept that moved on wheels, changing with the horizon. Imagine that large white structure standing before you, a juro. In Western languages it is called a yurt, but they call it home. This is not the camping tent, you know. This is an engineering marvel made of felt, defying the steppe winds. Its outer surface is pristine white. This whiteness is no accident. Thick felt panels made from sheep's wool are polished with a mixture of chalk dust and ground bone powder applied over them. When the sun hits it, the tent shines like a giant pearl. From miles away, it looks like a lighthouse in the green sea of the steppe. The ropes surrounding the tent are woven from horsehair, and when the wind blows, these ropes tighten. Holding the tent upright like a drum, you approach the door. The entrance, without exception, always faces south. On the steppe, you do not need a compass. A tent's door shows you the direction. The reason it faces south is both to receive the most light and to turn its back on the harsh northern winds. However, before entering, there is a vital rule you must observe: the threshold. Stepping on that wooden door threshold is strictly forbidden. The threshold is considered the neck of the house's guardian spirit. Stepping on it is an insult equivalent to stepping on the host's throat, and in ancient times, this could even be considered a cause for war. You take your step gently, gliding over the threshold without touching it, and enter. The inside is a warm and dim cocoon, completely different from the world outside of time. The first thing you notice is the smell. This is not an unpleasant smell, it is the scent of living. The resinous, incense-like smell of burning juniper wood, the woolly texture of warmed felt, the animal warmth of expensive furs, and that slightly sour fermented milk smell hanging in the air. This mixture of scents is strangely reassuring and enveloping, like a womb. When your eyes adjust to the dim light, you notice the richness inside. The floor is covered with layers of Persian carpets and sable furs from Siberia. There is soft, thick insulation between you and the cold ground outside. The place you step on is so soft that the sound of your footsteps disappears. In the center of the room, or rather this circular universe, the sacred hearth, the golomt, burns. The fire is the heart of the house. Not wood but argal, dried dung, is used as fuel. Surprisingly, this fuel does not smell bad. As it burns, it emits a herbal, grassy, pleasant aroma and burns with a blue, calm flame. Smoke drifts to the sky, to the stars, through the round window in the exact center of the ceiling, the tuno. This window is also the clock of the tent. Time is known by the angle at which sunlight hits the ground. When the light hits the hearth, it is noon. When it hits the bed, evening has come. The Khan sits on a slightly raised platform, on tiger skins, at the northernmost part of the tent, directly opposite the entrance. This is the corner of honor. Here, social life flows with silent and subtle rituals. In the presence of the Khan, one does not speak loudly, one does not laugh. Communication is conducted through objects and gestures. For example, the snuff bottle ritual. Guests and the host offer each other small palm-sized work of art bottles carved from jade or agate called koso. Inside these bottles are special herbs. Presenting the bottle means, my intentions are peaceful, my hands are empty. I offer you my most precious scent. You take the bottle with 2 hands respectfully, open the lid slightly, smell it, and give it back again with 2 hands. This gentle exchange, performed without speaking a single word, is the foundation of steppe diplomacy. And then, that famous drink is offered. Kumis, arag. Just to the left of the tent entrance hangs a bag made of massive oxhide. Inside is fermenting mare's milk. It is a tradition for everyone who enters to stir the milk with the wooden ladle attached to this bag. This means contributing to the abundance of the house. Now imagine that milk offered to you in a silver bowl. Its color is not pure white, but slightly transparent, like a pearl. You might be surprised when you taste it. It is not creamy and sweet like cow's milk. It is fizzy. It creates a slight tingle on the tongue like champagne. It tastes sour, tart, but it also has an almond-like sweetness coming from the back. It is slightly alcoholic. For the people of the steppe, this is not just a drink, but a source of life cleaner than water and full of vitamins. In this geography, where there are no vegetables, it is the white blood that keeps them alive. Before taking his bowl, the Khan dips his ring finger into the milk and sprinkles a drop into the air towards the 4 cardinal directions. This is a tax paid to the sky and the earth. A deep peace prevails in the tent. In the background you hear the hum of a bard. He holds a morin kur, a horsehead fiddle. This instrument has only 2 strings, one made from a male horse's tail, the other from a female horse's tail. But when he draws the bow across the strings, the sound that comes out is as rich as an orchestra, deep like a cello, howling like the wind, and the bard begins throat-singing kumi. Without moving his lips, he produces 2 different sounds from the depths of his throat at the same time. While one sound comes from the floor like a low drone, the other draws melodies like a high-pitched whistle above it. This is not a human voice. This is the sound of the wind hitting the rocks, the flow of water, the neighing of a horse. Nature itself speaks in the bard's throat. This sound slows down your heartbeat, putting you into a hypnotic trance. Here, between these thick felt walls, all that chaos of the Silk Road, the groans of camels, sandstorms, the bargaining of merchants feel very far away, very unimportant. Outside there's a freezing night. Wolves are howling. But inside, you are in a safe haven with the crackling of the fire and the warmth of the furs. The Khan's tent is an island of peace in motion. Tomorrow this tent will be dismantled. Those complex wooden lattices folded, the felts rolled up and loaded onto massive ox carts. A huge palace will disappear in an hour and be reborn at another point on the horizon. But tonight, while the blue flame of the fire dances, the world has stopped. And now, the fire is turning to ash. The flame of the hearth leaves its place to the calm, red glow of the embers. The intense heat inside the tent gives way to a sweet, sleepy coolness. We have traveled a long way. We walked beside the camels in the ruthless, freezing winds of the Gobi Desert. We left our footprints in those fine, endless sands. Together with Marco Polo, we crossed the borders of the known world, getting lost in foreign palaces, in silences masked with silk, in paper money, and in the disappointment of rhinoceroses. We descended into the depths of the earth, into the darkness. We witnessed the eternal watch of Emperor Qin's dull-eyed gray soldiers. We thought of the silent metallic flow of Mercury rivers. And finally, in the middle of the steppe, in a warm palace made of felt, we rested on furs with the lullaby of the horsehead fiddle. History consists not only of wars, dates, and victories. History is actually the sum of these silent moments, these endless waits, these fatigues and deep sleeps. Those people, those emperors, those soldiers, those travelers, and those camel tenders, they all completed their tasks. They all laid down their burdens and fell into history's long, silent, dreamless sleep. Now it is your turn. Feel how heavy your body has become. Imagine the burden on your shoulders being placed on the ground, just as caravans unload their burdens. Let those last thoughts in your mind blow away with the wind, disappearing on the horizon, just like grains of sand in the desert. You are safe, you are warm, and tonight, you no longer need to go anywhere. You do not need to walk any path. The endless, calm horizon of the Silk Road will now continue in your dreams. If this dusty and quiet journey has rested you, do not forget to whisper below this video where in the world, from which city, from which quiet room you are joining us. Perhaps on our next journey, we will go to the silence of another time, of another ocean. Good night, and have sweet, historyless sleep.